Here is a refined 2,000 to 2,300 word version of your text, keeping the tone, structure, and core ideas intact while tightening it. Imagine it's October 1923. You're a 38-year-old civil engineer named Heinrich, living in a respectable apartment in Frankfurt. You hold a degree from a prestigious technical university, earned through years of disciplined study and sacrifice. You have a government job designing infrastructure. Your salary arrives on time. Your profession is stable, respected, and secure, or so it seems. On October 1st, you receive your monthly paycheck. By October 15th, it has lost most of its purchasing power. By November 1st, the paper it's printed on is worth more as fuel than as money. Nothing about your job has changed. Your title remains. Your office still exists. You still spend your days drafting plans for projects that will never be built because the city can no longer afford them. You are still a professional, but you are now a professional in a system that has stopped needing professionals. Across the city, in a neighborhood you rarely visit, a man named Ernst is thriving. Ernst is a cobbler. He has no formal education. He left school at 14 and spent decades learning how to repair boots, shoes, and leather goods. His hands are worn and scarred. His workshop smells of chemicals and leather. He no longer accepts money. Instead, he trades directly: boots repaired for bread, shoes resold for coal, leather goods fixed in exchange for meals. By every traditional standard, Ernst is a modest tradesman. But in October 1923, he is economically powerful. This is not a story about fairness or education. It's about a mechanism, a repeatable pattern that appears in every major economic collapse. When systems fail, the labor market doesn't simply shrink. It restructures, rapidly and predictably, around what actually matters. A modern economy is built in layers. At the base is physical production: food, construction, repair, healthcare. Above that is coordination: logistics, administration, and operations. Above that sits abstraction: finance, law, and institutional management. At the top is narrative: marketing, branding, and strategy. In stable conditions, each layer supports the next. But when collapse begins, the layers don't fail equally. They break from the top down. Narrative collapses first, then abstraction, then coordination. The base layer, physical production, not only survives, it becomes dominant. This is why the labor market shifts so dramatically in crises. It isn't random. It follows the structure of the system itself. The professions that consistently thrive share a common trait: they produce or restore real, physical value. The skilled trades are the clearest example: the plumber, the carpenter, the mechanic, the electrician. These people don't sell credentials or abstract services. They sell function. They take something broken and make it work again. In collapsing economies, physical objects become the only reliable store of value. New goods are scarce. Supply chains break. Imports vanish. Everything must last longer. And when something breaks, it stays broken unless someone can fix it. That's where tradespeople become indispensable. In Weimar Germany, a barter economy emerged as currency failed. Tradespeople occupied its center. A cobbler could work indefinitely, trading repaired goods for essentials. A mechanic could keep vehicles running when replacements were impossible. Their labor was tied directly to physical outcomes, not abstract currency. The same pattern appeared in the Soviet Union after 1991. As the ruble collapsed, state salaries became meaningless. But those who could fix things, plumbers, electricians, mechanics, remained economically active. They were paid in food, fuel, or whatever people had. Their skills remained liquid even as the monetary system disintegrated. The second profession that thrives is the farmer. This seems obvious, but modern economies obscure its importance. Very few people today know how to grow food. In developed countries, agricultural knowledge is rare. But in a crisis, it becomes the most valuable skill of all. Everything else depends on food production. Remove it, and nothing else matters. Cuba's special period in the 1990s illustrates this clearly. When Soviet support ended, food imports collapsed. The formal food system broke down. What replaced it was local, decentralized agriculture. Urban farming spread rapidly. People with even basic knowledge of growing food became essential. Gardens turned into economic hubs. Food became currency. Knowledge of planting, harvesting, and preserving crops became a form of power that no monetary collapse could erase. The same dynamic appeared in Greece during its financial crisis. As incomes fell and unemployment rose, households turned to growing their own food. Farmers and small producers gained importance. Their status rose not because they became richer in traditional terms, but because they controlled access to something essential. The third profession that consistently survives is the hands-on medical practitioner. Healthcare doesn't disappear during collapse. Illness and injury continue. But the system that supports modern medicine, hospitals, insurance, supply chains can fail. When it does, the value shifts to practitioners who can operate independently. A doctor who can diagnose, treat wounds, and manage illness with limited resources retains economic power. Their knowledge is portable. It exists in their hands and mind. In Weimar Germany, doctors stopped charging in currency and began accepting goods. In Venezuela, as the healthcare system deteriorated, doctors who could adapt continued to function through informal exchange. The key factor is independence. When skills don't rely entirely on institutions, they remain usable. The fourth profession is the practical teacher. When systems collapse, people need to learn new skills quickly. Careers disappear. Old knowledge becomes irrelevant. New survival skills are required. Formal education systems often fail to adapt in time. Informal teaching fills the gap. In Argentina's crisis after 2001, people turned to learning practical skills, food preservation, repair work, small-scale trade. Those who could teach these skills became economically valuable. The teacher who can transfer usable knowledge, how to grow food, fix equipment, or navigate barter, becomes essential. The fifth profession is the merchant. When supply chains break, goods don't disappear entirely. They become harder to access. The person who can find goods, transport them, and facilitate exchange becomes critical. In post-Soviet Russia, millions became informal traders, traveling to acquire goods unavailable locally. These individuals weren't merchants before the collapse, but they adapted quickly. They filled the gap left by broken systems. Merchants thrive because they connect supply to demand when formal systems fail. Now consider the professions that collapse. The first is financial services. These roles depend entirely on stable currency, functioning markets, and reliable institutions. They manage claims on future value, investments, insurance, portfolios. When currency collapses or institutions fail, those claims become meaningless. The profession loses its foundation. In Weimar Germany, financial intermediaries became irrelevant almost overnight. In Argentina, financial systems froze, wiping out the value of managed assets. The professionals themselves didn't lose skill, but their skills no longer had a function. The second is administrative coordination, middle management, compliance, and corporate bureaucracy. These roles exist within complex organizations. When collapse occurs, organizations simplify drastically. Layers of management disappear. In the Soviet collapse, millions of administrators found their expertise useless. They had deep knowledge of a system that no longer existed. The third is the narrative economy, marketing, advertising, and branding. These professions rely on consumer spending, stable markets, and available products. When people focus only on essentials, demand for narrative disappears. In Greece and Venezuela, marketing industries shrank dramatically. Not because professionals lacked talent, but because the economic context that made their work valuable vanished.
The fourth is real estate.
Property transactions depend on credit, stable currency, and legal certainty. Collapse removes all three. Transactions freeze. Without transactions, intermediaries lose their role. The fifth is luxury services. These depend on disposable income, the first thing to disappear in crisis. As survival becomes the priority, non-essential services vanish. Looking across these categories, the pattern is clear. The professions that survive produce direct, tangible value. Their output can be exchanged in any form. Their knowledge is portable. The professions that collapse rely on systems. They manage abstractions, not physical outcomes. Their value depends on stability. This doesn't mean abstract professions are useless. In stable systems, they are essential, but their value is conditional. The deeper implication is uncomfortable. Modern economies are more abstract than ever. Fewer people produce physical value directly. More people operate in layers that depend on system stability. History shows that systems are not permanent. Crises are not rare. And when they happen, the labor market restructures in predictable ways. The question is simple. What value do you produce if the system stops functioning? If your answer depends entirely on institutions, currency, or complex systems, you are positioned in the most vulnerable layer. If your answer is something physical, functional, or essential, something another person can use directly, you are positioned in the layer that persists. This is not prediction. It is observation. The same pattern has repeated across countries, decades, and economic systems. When collapse comes, the economy doesn't disappear. It reorganizes downward toward what is real, immediate, and necessary. And in that restructuring, titles don't matter. Credentials don't matter. What matters is what you can do that retains value when everything else does not.